Well, hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the Acts 17 podcast. I'm here with a very special guest, Teresa Granberry, who is the president of Harvest Creek Publishing and Design. Hi, Teresa, how are you?
Great. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm so excited to talk a little bit about what's going on in your world and how Christ is using what you're doing to make a difference in your world and the world around and turning the kingdom upside down and all that kind of stuff. But I'd like to
Yeah.
start just kind of getting to know and have our listeners kind of have some time to get to know who you are, particularly your faith story. So when and how and what ways did Christ turn your life upside down?
Well, Jason, I was born in a ministerial family.
Hmm.
I am the granddaughter, the daughter, the stepdaughter, and I was the wife of a Methodist minister. So
Yeah,
somewhere up in heaven, the Lord had his hand on
yeah,
me, I tell you
yeah.
what. But in the Methodist church, when we were growing up, they used to give pins for perfect attendance.
Okay.
And I don't want to brag or anything, but I had 8 years of perfect attendance in the
Wow.
Methodist church. I could sing every hymn in the Methodist
I
hymnal
bet.
by memory.
Yeah,
So I grew up thinking that I was saved.
yeah.
And of course, going to church all the time doesn't make you a Christian any more than going to
Right,
McDonald's makes you a hamburger.
right.
So back when I was a youth, they had lay witness missions.
Hmm.
And one came to our church and they were telling all these wonderful stories about how they were on drugs and then God delivered them or how they
Mm,
were burdened by something. And I was listening and I was thinking, I can't just say, well, I went to church all my life and then I became a Christian. I needed a
right,
story, so to speak.
right.
And I guess I got my story. Our family was hit head on by a drunk driver
Oh my
on New Year's
goodness.
Eve.
Man.
And
Wow.
my father and my brother and my aunt, who happened to be riding in the car with us, as well as the other man, were all killed instantly. But when our cars hit, I was ejected out the back window.
Wow.
So I woke up in the hospital, and my mom was standing there to tell me the news about my father and
Mm,
brother. And
right.
then she just quietly left the room. And there in the hospital, I cried out to God because my dad was such a popular minister
Mm,
and a youth minister at the time too. And I thought, God, why would you take him and not me? I
wow.
was just a teenager.
Yeah.
And I had a divine encounter with God there in the hospital.
Wow.
And he spoke to me and told me, I saved your life for a reason, and I'm going to make it clear to you that I had my hand on you
Wow.
during this time.
Wow.
So months later, we went back to visit the scene of the accident because I was still processing losing my
Right.
dad and everything. And I walked around to the back of the car, and there was a big hole in the back of the car. And I did not have a single cut on my face. And the Lord said, I put my hand on you when you flew through that window. Not to mention that I had a hairline skull fracture. My brother and I had argued about where I would be sitting when we got in the back seat to leave that day. And so there were just too many ways that God had rearranged my circumstances to keep me here. And that's when I gave my life to the Lord and said, okay, I'm a believer. I will follow you. I will trust you. So,
Isn't that something how there's so many times in life where in the midst of pain and suffering and what I imagine in your situation to be total confusion and darkness, that
yes,
the light breaks through and God meets you right there in those moments of pain. And in your case, not just to bring you comfort, but actually to change the trajectory of your life.
yes, absolutely. Absolutely. I'm not going to say that it was easy because my father was a minister
Mm.
at the time. We had to move out of the parsonage. We had to change our whole life. My mom had to change careers to raise my sister
Wow.
and I for the rest of our days at home. Of course, then one day, a couple years later, she came home and said she had a blind date with another minister, and they got engaged on their first date,
Wow.
which was really fun. That's what brought me
Wow.
to Texas. They had
Yeah.
a Brady Bunch wedding with six
Mm,
kids, and so
mm,
anyway, it was miraculous. I had a wonderful stepfather for 40 some years, and very thankful to God for all that He did, in and through all of that.
So you're a daughter, granddaughter of Methodist preachers, your
Yes,
stepdaughter of a Methodist preacher, and now you're married to one who was ordained in the Methodist Church, and then God led him on a different path. So when did you and Sam meet, and how did God bring you together, and what are you doing now together? And I know he's ministering in other ways, and so you're sort of he's partnering a little bit with you, right, or a lot with the
Yes. Yeah.
publishing. So I'd like to
Oh,
hear about that too.
absolutely.
But how did he bring you together? And it's it's incredible to me that, of course, I have a special place in my heart for Methodism because I was
Yeah.
originally ordained in the Methodist Church. So I'm curious, though, as people of Methodist tradition, where we talk about the grace of God, the prevenient grace of God, the justifying grace of God, the sanctifying grace of God. So I can see grace all over in different dimensions. Your story. So
Thank you.
God then not only showed you grace, but God brought you another Methodist in Sam. How did that come about?
My grandmother always told me, she said, I know you're going to be married to a minister. And it's interesting because three of the four people I dated with any seriousness at all during college or high school ended up being ministers. But it got to the point where I was growing tired of being in a ministerial family, of course.
Mm.
So I would ask anyone, what are you planning on being when you grow up? And Sam was in geology at the time. I thought that's very
Okay.
far from ministry. There's no
Yeah.
way. And we've been married about 3 years when he came, and so I think I'm, called to ministry.
Wow.
The Methodist Church started going in a different direction than
Mhm.
we were. Sam attended Asbury. We're very
Yeah.
conservative, and not that Methodists aren't conservative, but
Right.
they started pulling away from some of the John Wesley doctrine.
Yeah.
And about 20 years into our ministry in the Methodist Church, Sam said, I can see this isn't going to be sustainable. And pulled out and retooled, became a financial advisor. But in a way, he's still ministering to people because
Right.
money is a very important subject to people, and
Yeah.
it goes to the root of who they are, of course. So he
And it's
he
the
does a
root
lot
to
of ministry.
and that career goes to the root of who he is as a minister. Is very relational, and he meets people where they are, and obviously we know it's important to be good stewards of our finances and be faithful with those finances. So he's helping people do
One of
that.
the biggest things he used to counsel people on when he was in ministry was their differences in opinion about
Yeah.
money and so on. So it was a good fit.
Yeah. So along the way, then God's grace just overwhelmed you in the time of need, and then has been with you and guiding you and directing you down this path now where you are today. So how did you first get introduced to basically you have to have a love for books, I would imagine, to be a publisher, right? So how did that come about within you?
Well, even when I was a little girl, we lived next door to a library, and I would go there first thing and drop my
That's
books off
convenient.
from school and spend
Yeah.
hours and hours there. There's been a lot of writers in our family and everything, but I had a corporate career for many, many years and was traveling all over the world, and I would always take books with me. They were very important. So when I left my corporate career 10 years ago, I started going around to volunteer at places. I even went to the church that we attended at the time and to see if I could maybe help in the back office or something. I had balanced an $8 million budget to the penny every year. I thought maybe I
Wow.
could help in some way
Yeah, I guess.
and managed large teams all over the world. And the pastor at that church at the time told me, hey, would you like to serve coffee on Sunday mornings? And that wasn't exactly what I was thinking would be the volunteer work that I was
Right.
getting into. But I said, oh, I don't drink coffee, but I'll do whatever. What would you like? And he said, well, we're trying to get some old people to attend our church. And if you serve coffee, then people will see that there are old
Wow.
people at the church. Needless to say, we didn't last much longer at that church. I didn't want to be a
Right.
poster child for old.
Right.
But the more I would go around to agencies or things to volunteer, they would tell me I was too old.
Mm.
And that began to bother me. So I conducted a national survey. I paid a survey company to contact hundreds,
Wow.
thousands of people. The only criteria was they had to be over 55. And I had a series of questions I asked, and the book practically wrote itself
Wow.
because people sent all kinds of stories. And that was my first book, and very, very exciting. It was like having a baby. It was very, very exciting.
So before we get to the publishing part, so just so our listeners can kind of hear a few things from you, from your perspective and based on your opinion, I am a big believer that books are very important particularly for the development of children and their minds.
Yes, yeah.
So were there books that helped shape, besides the Word of God? Because I'm guessing you were very familiar with the Bible very early on. But besides the Bible, were there books that really helped shape your mind and your thinking, your logic, and your ability to articulate? And what were they? And would you recommend those or different books to parents of young children today?
There were several books, and of course, the authors have come and gone, with my age and stage. One thing that was different back then that I'm noticing now, particularly with the authors that I work with that are trying to reach a younger generation, is back then we were interested in Bonhoeffer and Spurgeon
Right.
and Wesley and all of
Hmm.
that. The C.S. Lewis was, of course,
Oh,
one of my favorite writers.
yeah, mine too.
Profound, deep
Yeah.
writing. I'm a very analytical, intuitive
Mhm.
person, so I love, love, love that. You may have heard of the book The Anxious Generation, which has been on the bestseller list for 52
Mm,
weeks.
mm.
It's a book about the Gen Zers
Okay.
who would have been the age and stage I was when I became a Christian. They are the first generation that has social media, internet,
Hmm.
smartphones at their ready disposal since birth.
Right.
So they're not picking up C.S. Lewis and Bonhoeffer. They want the quick, instant kind of writing.
Right.
And they don't mind devotionals, but they want them brief. They want the narrative or the Bible versions included in the writing itself. Whereas we used to take our Bible and
With both books up.
yes, simultaneously. So that's a big difference between the generation I came up in and
Yeah.
that same age and stage now.
Mhm.
But yes, Bonhoeffer, all of them. And of course, C.S. Lewis we had the whole series,
Yeah.
on the
Well,
shelf.
yeah. So today, then, what would you in this for these kids that are part of this generation where they have to have it quick and they have to have it now and they have to have it all one place? Is there still value though of somehow some way bringing what we would call maybe the classics of the Christian faith, particularly to them, even if it's just snippets of
Yeah,
C.S. Lewis and Chesterton and yeah. So
yes,
how do we go
absolutely.
about doing that? How do we put that before them? I know there's some new curriculum actually in the public school system that actually has glimpses of the Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. Because I think when I read C.S. Lewis, particularly when I read that generation, first of all, I think he's brilliant. But also, you're reading not just for content. You're learning how to think. You're learning how to write based on your reading because they're so
Absolutely.
logical and
Absolutely.
sequential in how they communicate. So I wonder, in your perspective, how do we go about taking some of these classics like The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, or the Screwtape Letters of C.S. Lewis, or Mere Christianity in chunks, right? And how do we
Right.
how do we how do we take that before our kids and get them to see the value and importance of this?
Yeah, some of the articles I've been reading lately deal with what they call instant faith. And
Instant faith.
faith doesn't happen in an instant. And that's not particularly how the Lord's worked in my life.
Hmm.
But again, because everything's been at their ready disposal, knowledge, information at just, the touch of a screen, they're looking for life-changing truth in a compact, quick, instant form. And that's where the challenge is.
Hmm.
Of course, the devotional and Christian nonfiction space is a tight space anyway. And
Right.
there's a lot of owners of that are really hard to break into certain areas. But also, if you take a snippet of something like that and then put a call to action that's very relatable,
Okay. Yeah.
and not that C.S. Lewis or Bonhoeffer were carrying around smartphones or had that ready
Right.
information or anything like that, but there still is the parallels in their life and ours that can, if we can make it relatable with a call to action in a very brief form, I think that's the key. It's interesting that you mentioned curriculum too, because there's three areas right now that are very huge in Christian publishing. Libraries.
Huh?
For whatever reason, people are going to libraries. It may be that so many of the Christian bookstores have gone out of business, the brick and mortar stores.
That's true. That's a good
You
observation.
had
Yeah.
Cokesbury,
Right.
Zondervan, Lifeway, all of those we used to be able
Lifeway.
to just walk into, and you don't now. So libraries are beefing up their Christian reading sections. Then again, curriculum in schools, and then the books on Christian nationalism. are very, very huge right now, which is something we haven't seen before, the mix of Christianity and politics per se.
Yeah, that is that's fascinating that we have to give them just a little snippets, but I like the call to action. And that might be, before we move on to talk about the publishing part, that might be indicative of the the generations of today that are younger, their universal human quest for significance and meaning and purpose. And so the call to action is a way to tie into that or trigger that sense of meaning and significance and purpose, because they want to go out and do something now. They want to be important now. They want to matter now. So I love that feature of that. And I think it's important for the church to publish materials that offer that opportunity to grow in their faith by doing something right now. But also, whether they know it or not, it's important for the church to somehow get them engaged and get them in the process of discipleship, especially the young
Yes,
kids in the Christian faith,
yes,
and for helping them see that things take work, good things take time, and there's a development that really is important, particularly when it comes to building and just the idea of building and construction and constructing your faith, or growing your faith. There's a progression there that I think it's important for Christian authors,
yes.
particularly to embrace and to incorporate in their writings.
Well, and an author, I think I read that in maybe a Christianity magazine, said it's bite-sized.
Bite size, I
Um,
like that.
feeding. They can't be drinking from a fire hose right now. First of all, there's way too many distractions, and you don't
Right,
have their attention for that long. There's too many other things to steal their attention. But if it's something that you can, again, somehow make it relatable, that's the word that keeps
right.
coming to mind. Years ago, and I can't remember his last name, there was a book called Search for Significance. First
Mm,
name is Robert. He was from the Pasadena area here in
okay.
Texas, and we used that for our youth group at the time when Sam was on staff at the church in the Woodlands, and that seemed to really connect. This author had a tremendous way of making things relatable, making them
Mm,
understandable. People can be intimidated by the word,
mm,
and
mm,
particularly if they're under conviction or they're have a low self-worth to begin with. And so the search for
mm.
significance was just on par. I think
Good,
it would still be very useful today.
good, good. So just to kind of move in a different direction a little bit. So a lot of people might be listening to this and they think of one day having something to check off their bucket list about writing a book. So
Yeah.
tell us about how you move from not being an author to being an author. Tell us about that difficulty, that process, and then maybe even how to go about doing it. Because now that they've heard or listened to you, they might be thinking, oh, I have now before me somebody I can go to help me with the publishing process. So what does authoring and publishing look like today in your context?
There's been a huge paradigm shift over the last 20 years in publishing, and many people are still under the notion that I have to submit a 3-chapter proposal to one
Mm,
of the big 5 publishers, continue to do that until somebody picks me up. The big 5 have become a little bit elite.
mm,
Unless you're Joel Osteen's sister or Joyce Meyer's brother, I laughingly tell people it's probably very slim that you'll get a big 5 deal. You
mm,
can after you publish with independently and then
mhm.
have some proven success. Um, right now, you can't get a deal with Simon Schuster, HarperCollins, Penguin, Random House, any of those unless you have an agent, unless
Okay.
you can prove you have a following of at least 50,000 people.
Wow.
Well, I don't even know if I know 50,000
I
people. So
know,
where does
right?
that leave me, or any of the really good
Wow.
authors out there that we
Right.
work with that have a good story to tell or a good
Mm,
lesson to teach, life lessons? So
yeah.
on the other end of the spectrum then would be, I guess, complete self-publishing. And in
Okay.
our day and time, with the internet, with Amazon,
Right.
with word processing and spell check and things, people try to do it completely on their own.
On their own.
The chances of someone being good at the legal aspects, the cover design, the interior layout, the proofreading, and the writing,
Mm,
all of that at once, something's going to slip.
right.
Of course, you don't want it to be the writing. I've seen people put so much time in the cover
Mm,
design that they fail a little bit in the writing. So bringing
Because you
things back
can't
to the
judge a book
center,
by its cover.
people absolutely do judge books by the
That's
cover.
why I don't know where that saying even originated from. Well, because back in the day the covers were so bland, right? But
Yes,
now, I mean, they can really communicate the essence of the book very well in our digital age.
they should. Absolutely.
Yeah, but you're right. So some people spend too much time thinking about how the cover looks and they don't pay attention to the content.
Absolutely. Or they put a lot of time into the writing and forget the proofreading or the
Yeah.
editing. There's 3 different levels of editing, too. So all of that, staying ahead of the algorithm on Amazon and things like that. It's better to have a team. And so the company that I'm president over, we're what we call concierge publishing. And we do everything from the research to we've done ghostwriting for a couple of high profile people that needed biographies and things. And we've done books for people who are in ministry who sell books at the table at the back after their speaking engagements and so on, and everyone in between. I have a phrase that I use all the time: everyone has a book in them.
Mm,
And if you
that's
walked
good.
into a room of 1,000 people and said, raise your hand if you want to write a book, do you know that almost the entire room would raise their hand? Now, keep your hand up if you've started a book, and that number would probably drop to about 60% of the room.
Okay.
How many of you have finished your manuscript? It would drop to 30%.
Wow.
How many of y'all have gone on to publish your book? And only 8 out of 1,000 people publish a book.
8%. Wow.
It's a very overwhelming, cumbersome process, but it's also one of the most significant achievements I know I've ever accomplished, and I see that in our authors too.
So for people who want to be part of that 8%, right? So what is the structure? What does the discipline in life look like for them to go from A to Z and finish the book and have it out there into the hands of readers? In a nutshell, what do you need? If everybody has a book within them, what do you need to get it across the
Pull it
finish
out.
line?
Yeah. And it depends on the way your mind is geared and so on. Typically, we help our authors with this mind mapping.
Mind
And
mapping,
you
okay?
start with the core theme of the book. What is the main goal of getting the book into hands of
Okay.
readers? What would you want them to experience or understand from that? And then, of course, it's just like a spider. You would work maybe your next core points out from that,
Okay.
and then some offshoots. Well, then how do you accomplish that? And how many sections? It's
Right.
sort of a way to outline all of your chapters.
Okay.
We always tell people never give your book a title until it's written.
Mm-hmm.
Too many people have changed the title of their book once it's final and they realize that it went in a different direction or a different way than they thought it would be. And then just start fleshing out all of those stems off the spider and off this wheel that you've started with. That's really the easiest way. Now, we have people that bring us manuscripts that are completely down to the last detail. And then I have people who just do an explosion of words,
Wow.
just get it out of their
Yeah.
mind.
Right.
And then they ask us to help them make some sense of it. It varies, again, because of the way people think and the logic they use to process things in their mind.
So put it down in a sort of mind map and put the concepts around the map, knowing that they can be fluid and they can actually, unlike a real map with continents and islands and countries, the mind map can be fluid. It can be rearranged, right? So it's
Yes.
sort of like a puzzle as well. And then
Yes.
will you take one piece of the puzzle as you go and then just kind of put some material to it, flesh it out?
You would hope that that center section then has maybe 4 or 5 spokes coming from it, and then
Okay.
maybe 2 spokes from that. That gives you 10 chapters, which is a very nice sized book. The average nonfiction book is around 50,000 words.
Okay.
The average fiction book is around 80,000 words. People say, well, how would I know what that is? Each page is typically 200 on a typical page. So if I started out to go to point A to Z and I knew I had to get to 80,000 or 50,000, I wouldn't even begin.
It's overwhelming.
Right.
Right.
But
It's
can you get
overwhelming.
one
Yeah.
chapter, one
Right.
section? It's
Hmm.
just, easier to have
Right.
milestones along the way.
Right. Yeah. So what are some of the favorite projects you've done in the last 5 years? And then the second question, as we're kind of wrapping up our time here, what's on the horizon? What's exciting that's next?
One of the most exciting projects I've been a part of because it's done so well and it's changed so many lives is working with Dr. Brian Artis, who was one of the frontline doctors during COVID and realized that we were probably being fed some lies during that whole
Yeah.
process. And so he wrote a book called Moving Beyond the COVID Lies because he was
Wow.
tired of everybody talking about the problems resulting from COVID. And he was ready
Right.
for some solutions. And so his book has done fabulous. You cannot make the New York Times as an independently published book. The rules to make the New York Times is it has to be traditionally published and sell over 5,000 copies in 1 week. He's sold over 100,000 copies. So he made the equivalent to the New York Times
Okay.
for independent publishing, which is super, super exciting. We've also
That's very
translated
exciting.
it into a couple of other languages.
Wow.
I've also worked with Artur Pawlowski, who was the Canadian pastor who was part of the truck
Oh, yeah.
rally at the time of COVID. And his book documents his 50 days in prison.
Wow.
Very, very exciting. I also have several authors who have journaled their life so that their grandkids and their great grandkids will
That's
have a
special.
legacy
That's
to
great.
understand what's been going on.
Yeah.
I'm looking at my board over there. We have about 13 authors on the board for 2025. And
Wow.
every single one of them I'm proud of and is just very good at what they do and what they have to say.
So you've got a lot of work to do this coming year. That's a lot of
It's never a dull
projects.
moment.
That's a lot of projects. So in 1 year, how close will you be? Where will you be next year this time with these 13 authors? Will you have lots of the projects finished, or what's the time
Oh,
frame?
yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes. But like I said, I've got them all scheduled out through the rest of 2025. We have several book signings for some. One of the features that we have at Harvest Creek is we're developing some online podcasting for our authors. Oh, another exciting project that we just finished was an author whose son was killed in Afghanistan, and he's a man here from Houston. He was on the Michael Berry show last week.
Wow.
People were calling. My phone was ringing off the hook after
Wow,
he
that's
spoke
great.
with Michael Berry. God has taken the remnants of that awful situation, becoming a Gold Star family, and now he's talking to people all over about how to overcome things. He's a solid Christian, and it's
Good.
just exciting to see God take
Yeah.
words and
Right.
bring them to life through authors.
Right. Well, I mean, the spoken word is
Yes.
obviously pretty powerful because in the beginning, God said, "Let there be light," and here we are. It came from
Yep.
speaking, and then He created us in our image. So words are
Yep.
important.
Yep.
And I know in our day and age, in our culture, there's a lot of garbage out there. There are a lot of words being spoken that are blasphemous and that are negative, that are hateful and detrimental and
Yes.
destructive. And so one of the ways as believers we can continue to turn the world upside down is communicating the message of the gospel and the things of the kingdom and have it available to combat all the darkness with the light that can be spoken and read. So
Yes.
I'm just so proud of you and Sam and the
Thank
journey
you.
you've taken. And we
Thank
could
you.
probably do this again and talk about future projects. I know I'm excited about one particular project that's hopefully I'm one of the names on your board.
You are. You are. Absolutely.
Yeah, yeah.
Yes.
And we're excited about doing some more work with you and seeing where God takes us. And our goal is that God will use us for His kingdom, for His glory, and to turn lives upside down for Christ. So thank you,
Yes.
Teresa, for all that
Thank
you've
you.
done and all you continue to do, and may God continue to bless you.
It's my pleasure. I'll just leave you with one thought. Our tagline or motto is blessing the world, one great
like
book at a
that.
time.
That's great.
And if someone has a book on their heart, I encourage them to become that blessing because you never know who's going
Right.
to be blessed by your own personal
Yeah.
story. And don't ever discount what that might do or how impactful that might be for
Right.
someone else.
That's good. That's good. It's good to be blessed, and it's, I think, even better to be a blessing.
Yes.
Yeah. So thank you for your time today, and we'll see you soon.
Thank
God
you
bless.
again, Jason. God bless.
All right. Well, thank you, Teresa.